This is Mainstreet with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Mainstreet. Gary Allen with you, as I am every Tuesday. We've had a couple of Tuesdays off due to some production issues and other situations that are going on. Hope you didn't mind, but we'll be back now for quite a while. We have a great guest on today, but before I get to that, I just want to thank a number of people, including yourselves, for tuning in at 2 o'clock. We're running a little bit behind, but that's okay. We got a great show for you, and we can run over a little bit. I want to thank, first of all, Michael and Grant Miller at the Community News Network for giving me this platform and allowing me to be on every Tuesday at 2 p.m. I also want to thank my executive producer, Mr. Rick Del Vecchio, for putting all this together and being with me through every step and every phase of this. My producer today is Andres, and I want to thank him very much for being part of this. Our community sponsors, the Japanese Gardens of Miami, as well as the Elks Lodges of South Florida. I just want to thank them all very much for being part of this particular program, Mainstreet. My guest this afternoon is Mr. Ron Magill from the Zoo Miami. He's been there for over 4 decades. He is a conservationist when it comes to taking care of animals and making sure that they are well taken care of. He works with zoos all over the world. He has won many awards for his work on television shows, and we're going to talk about his participation on The Lion King when they were putting that together, how they came into Zoo Miami to look at the animals and understand how they move and how they make their movements and everything. And it's really quite extraordinary. Ron is quite an extraordinary gentleman. I've known him for a number of years, and I'm very pleased that he has agreed to join us on this particular program. He was supposed to be with us about a month ago, but a turtle got bit by a shark and they had to do an operation. It's safe to say the turtle survived, and everybody is really happy down at the Zoo Miami. So without further ado, would you please welcome, my pleasure, Mr. Ron Magill.
I appreciate it, Gary. Thank you so much for the invitation. Sorry I couldn't make it, but good to know that turtle is doing well, and hopefully we'll be able to be released back to the wild soon.
Yeah, that was probably my number one question. Will the turtle go through any kind of shock or anything or is that just part of nature that they know that they're going to get picked on and attacked from time to time?
Well, she unfortunately had to have her left front flipper amputated. And people ask, well, is she going to be able to survive in the ocean with just 3 flippers? And the answer is yes. These turtles are very adaptable. She's a huge loggerhead. She's close to 400 pounds. And when she came in, she was gravid with eggs. So we were able to give her some oxytocin. She laid those eggs, and those eggs have been placed in an artificial nest on the beach. So hopefully they will also hatch out. But her recovery's been going remarkably well. She's had several follow-up procedures, and she's doing really well. So it's she was our first big patient at the new Sea Turtle Hospital at Zoo Miami, and hopefully she'll be released sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's something too exciting. You have a new Sea Turtle Hospital. Is that something unique for South Florida or for the United States?
Well, it's unique for us here in South Florida in the sense that, in the past when sea turtles were injured and sick, and the Sea Turtle Hospital is not a place, where we keep animals for permanent exhibition. It's just a hospital that treats, rehabilitates these turtles to release them back into the wild. And, there's several species of turtles, sea turtles found here in Florida. There's the green sea turtle, there's the loggerhead sea turtle, there's the leatherback sea turtle. And when these turtles sometimes get injured, whether they're struck by a boat, they can be, bitten by a shark, they get sick from ingesting, pollution in the water, whether it be plastics, balloons, things like that. They also get what's called a fibropapilloma disease. It's a type of benign tumor that grows on them. And we are the only sea turtle hospital now in South Florida that is qualified to treat that fibropapilloma disease, which could be fatal to the turtle. Not that it's a cancerous, malignant tumor. It's that those tumors can grow so big that they can cover the eyes, cover the nose, cover the mouth, where the animal cannot survive due to that. So we are now, one of 2 hospitals. There's one down in Marathon. There's one up further north by Boca. But we're one of the only ones right here in Miami-Dade County.
No, that's fantastic. It's funny. The turtle is considered, and I think this, by Native Americans as probably the strongest symbol of all the things that they believe in. When you see a turtle in their and their uh, religious beliefs, the turtle is always the foundation for the world.
Well, it's a
You know,
symbol. The turtle is, tortoises, turtles, they're the longest living land vertebrates on Earth. I mean, some tortoises can live over 150 years. So there's a certain foundation to that longevity that gives them a certain power in a lot of cultures.
yeah, yeah, they're great. What we're going to go back now a little bit. When you were a young man, what attracted you to get involved with animals? And I know you had a very unusual collection when you were growing up. Uh,
Well, I listen. I've always loved animals. As a small boy, I grew up in a small apartment in New York City. Um, was fascinated with going to the Bronx Zoo, with going to the Museum of Natural History there, which is one of the greatest museums on the planet. And I was taken by a show called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. That was kind of
yeah.
like my going to church every Sunday night, 7:30. That show, The Wonderful World of Disney, and that show really helped plant a seed in me that made me fascinated with animals. So I was always really fascinated with animals. When I was able to move down to Florida back in 1972, I was 12 years old, and that opened a whole other door, because here in South Florida, God, we've got all this wonderful wildlife. We got lizards, we got alligators, we got snakes, we got all kinds of things that I never saw in New York City running free here. And I started collecting things like, unfortunately, you'd a roadkill. You'd see a raccoon or a possum or a fox hit on the side of the road that was dead. And I started picking up heads and preparing the skulls. And I created I started way back when, where I've got a collection of skulls now that probably is well over 500 individual skulls from different animals, ranging from, tiny little bats to hippopotamus. But they were a teaching tool for me. Not only did I learned a lot just from assembling them, but I learned a lot just by looking at them, looking at the different dental structures, different.
Yeah.
Learn how well an animal can smell. You see the structure of the zygomatic arch, which is where the muscles attach, and you realize, God, these huge zygomatic arches. When you see a lion skull, you realize, wow, that's where it gets its power of biting. So there was a lot of things I learned just from touching and assembling those types of artifacts, and
Yeah.
to this day, it's very fascinating for me.
Yeah, but weren't you a volunteer at the zoo many, many, many years ago when you were a youngster, and you also worked at the Serpentarian as well.
Right. I started my first paying job working with animals was at the Miami Serpentarium, which is now defunct many, many years ago. But that was my first start working with snakes and crocodiles and turtles. But it was my first experience, of course, with venomous snakes, specifically cobras, where I got a lot of hands-on experience in some respects with those snakes.
Yeah.
And then straight as a zookeeper. I never actually volunteered. I started straight as a zookeeper right out of college, right out of the University of Florida. I started as a zookeeper at the old Crandon Park Zoo, which was the predecessor to what is now Zoo Miami. It was originally called Miami Metro Zoo, but I started as a zookeeper and just kind of progressively moved my way up: lead keeper, senior keeper, assistant curator, and now director of communications.
Is it fascinating to you to watch? Before you came on, my producer and I were watching some videos of animals. It's like he was showing one of a gorilla who saw his image in a mirror and he went berserk. I mean, he went absolutely berserk. And I remember in the zoo in Chicago, in downtown Chicago, that I would go to quite often, which was started by the gentleman who was the host of the Mutual of Omaha program. And go ahead.
Yeah, it was Marlon Perkins.
Yeah, Marlon Perkins. And I remember going into the chimpanzee and the gorilla exhibits and stuff. And yeah, the gorillas do kind of get a little feisty if you make the wrong move or you do something. One guy was standing there pounding his chest, and it was just irritating the living crap out of this one male gorilla. And the zoo, somebody working for the zoo said, "Please, sir, stop it, because you're irritating him." And he didn't seem to understand why he was irritating a gorilla. But do you find it fascinating at animals, what they do and what they will and won't do? I was telling Andres, my producer, that I saw a video once of a lion coming up to a monkey in Africa, a baby monkey, probably no more than maybe a month old, maybe 2 months old, sniffing it, could have eaten it, killed it, instead sniffed it and walked away and never came back. Whereas you find animals to be absolutely wonderful.
Animals are amazing. They're fascinating. They're all individuals. People have the misconception that they're all cookie cutter molds of each other, DNA, they're perfect. All the animals are going to act the same. And yeah, you couldn't be any further from the truth. Anybody who's owned different pet dogs know that each dog, though it's the same species, can have different personalities. Animals communicate in so many different kinds of ways, not just with conversations, but specifically body language, which is why that gentleman might have been, disturbing that gorilla, because different body language is very subtle to humans, can be very, very challenging to animals. Like for any of the great apes, you don't want to stare at them. You don't want to open your eyes wide. You don't want to smile. Things that we may interpret as, oh, wow, happiness or excitement is interpreted as a threat in a lot of the great apes and primates. So the body language are very subtle, but very important when trying to communicate with animals.
Is it safe to think and say at this particular point in time of our world that the only place where young people younger than me and maybe your children and young men like Andres and his family, the only place they're going to be able to see a lot of these animals is not in the wild anymore. It's going to be in zoos around the world.
Well, I hope that's not the case, Gary. I mean, I think the primary mission of all zoos should be to ensure that the animals that they have on exhibit on their habitats at the zoos still exist in the wild. That the limiting factor of people not being able to see certain animals in the wild is just, the financial challenge of the cost of getting to these exotic areas, but that there'll always be animals there in those areas. Having said that, yeah, there's certainly been a tremendous reduction in wild places and wild habitats. The reason why so many animals are in danger of extinction and so many animals have become extinct, quite frankly, is because of destruction, habitat removal. So yes, if we continue on the trajectory we're on, then yes, much less to see in the wild than what we see today. The fact of the matter is the UN came up with a study not too long ago, a nonpartisan study that said if we continue on this trajectory, we're in the next 50 years going to lose 1 million species of animals. That to me is beyond catastrophic. It's hard to even comprehend, but it should be a wake-up call for everybody.
Are the shows that are on TV and that I love to watch, animal shows and the Boogie Down Bronx and where you grew up and other zoos? I wish they'd put the Zoo Miami on a show. I think that would be absolutely fantastic to have you on there every week. Are shows like that and other shows showing about animal Attenborough's program, which I absolutely love, about creatures around the world, are they helping bring about a certain degree of awareness of what's going on in the planet?
First of all, when you talk about someone like Sir David Attenborough, he is to me the god of wildlife presenters. He is the bar that everybody should try to reach when it comes to presenting wildlife and speaking about wildlife. So everything that David Attenborough does to me is gold. It's absolutely, and it's very important. I think it's planted many seeds in many people about the importance of wildlife. Having said that, there are also some shows that are not that good. A lot of these shows that I see sometimes on Animal Planet, when animals attack the world's deadliest, a lot of this is sensationalizing animals. It's creating a fear that people have in animals that in turn leads to their persecution. And this is the wrong message. We've got to stop, fear mongering. We also have those people who like to exploit animals just so they get more looks, more likes, more, hits on their social media platforms. I'm totally against that. I don't believe in dressing chimps in clothing and, putting them at birthday parties with cakes just to get more likes on your stupid Instagram page, because that's exploiting an animal just for the benefit of your own social media exposure. So there's a lot of that going on that's wrong. A lot of these things that I see, with selfies and stuff like that with wildlife, wrong. But again, there's the good programming, the Planet Earth, the Blue Planet, these Attenborough documentaries, some of the National Geographic stuff is absolutely wonderful, and I think incredibly important in educating and inspiring people to care about our world wildlife.
Yeah, because he really, really loves this planet that we live on and everything about it. And I do not like the exploitation of animals just for the pure sake of exploiting animals. And someday, I hope someday, in our Asian friends countries, China, Japan, etc., that they get it, that the ivory and the horns from a rhino have no medicinal purposes at all whatsoever, that they don't do you any good at all, and killing these animals is a waste of beautiful, precious life that God has given us.
Well, that's absolutely true. The trouble is, these are cultural beliefs that have been passed down for generation after generation. And as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
But I do believe that that is changing. I believe we're seeing less and less of that. Um, Not to say it certainly it still exists, but I do believe that it is getting better, and that people are getting the message, and that these types of exploitations for cultural medicinal purposes for these types of animal byproducts is being reduced. I have
Yeah.
a feeling about that.
Yeah, I hope so. Talk about the charity that you have, the Conservation and Endowment Charity that you started some years ago. How is that going?
Well, it's going very well. It's got a close to $3 million that I've been able to personally raise myself, and it's the most important thing I've done in my entire career. For me, it's the thing I'm most proud of in my career. I tell people all the time, I didn't come to work at the zoo so long ago to work for an attraction. As a matter of fact, I go as far as to say that in a perfect world, we wouldn't need any zoos, because in a perfect world, everybody would be able to go to the wild places in our planet and be able to see these animals in the wild.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a perfect world, and I understand the value of good zoos in the sense that they provide very important windows into the world of the wild that helps plant seeds in people like it did in me, that hopefully grows into a passion to want to protect and conserve these animals. Because there's something that happens, Gary, when you look at an animal eye to eye. That personal
Yeah.
connection is something that is hard to describe. And that's the value that zoos have. But it's important that zoos understand that you just can't live on that alone. You can't be
No.
spending millions of dollars to open a new exhibit to draw people to your zoo without investing significant dollars into the wild that is where the animals you choose to exhibit naturally exist. Because at the end of the day, if the zoo is the last place that we can see these animals, then zoos have failed in what should be their number one priority, and that is to ensure that animals can always exist in the wild.
You're watching Main Street. Ron Miguel from Zoo Miami. He's an ambassador for the world, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to animals. He is a gator, unfortunately. I must say he is a
Hey, hey,
gator.
hey,
Hey, listen, I went to the
go
U,
Gators,
so
man.
yeah, I went to the U, so Um, Gary Allen with you as we are every Tuesday afternoon, and here on the Community News Network. Um, of the conservation, on some of these programs, we see where they're saying, well, we got to get so and so ready. They're going off to another zoo because they have mated here a number of times, and we need to bring in fresh blood. And I know that's so very important. I know that the last time you were on with me with my late night show, you talked about that aspect of it, that people don't necessarily always understand, that inbreeding, it can cause many problems. And zoos around the world, such as Zoo Miami, they work with other zoos to bring about animals in that bring in fresh blood and fresh generations and new possibilities and stuff for new breeding and many other ideas. How important is that in the conservation for the animals out there?
Well, it's incredibly important. And one thing that people need to understand is that, first of all, zoos do not take animals out of the wild anymore to put them inside captivity. The overwhelming majority of animals you see in zoos today, at least accredited zoos, are animals that were born in zoos. And zoos manage their populations very carefully. In working with the AZA, there's a program called the SSP, which stands for Species Survival Plan. And basically what that is that is a very carefully managed population of a particular species to
Hmm.
ensure that you don't have inbreeding. It's like, the pedigree in a dog with the AKC. And there's a stud bookkeeper for each species under the SSP that basically is like the chief of computer dating, to put it in layman's terms. That he or she will determine which male will breed with which female to produce the healthiest offspring with the greatest genetic diversity in it. And those
Oh,
populations managed cooperatively between zoos across the continent. So this is something people need to understand. This is why when an animal is born at a zoo, people say, oh, well, it'll stay with the zoo forever. No. Once it reaches sexual maturity, it's probably going to be sent to another institution that has the same species to introduce unrelated blood. And we may get another animal from their collection in exchange, depending on what the SSP keeper, stud bookkeeper says. So the objective here is to maintain as diverse a genetic gene pool as possible. And this produces the healthiest population. And the objective behind it is to keep a healthy population of that species for at least the next 100 years.
yeah. It's an expensive operation for zoos to undertake which is why you need donations from the community, visitors to the zoo, and everything else, because it's not easy shipping an animal from point A to point B. They usually do it via a jet airplane anyway, and that's not cheap.
Well, yeah, actually, the majority of animals are shipped over land. There are special transporters that specialize in nothing
Oh,
else than moving exotic zoo animals. For moving smaller animals, things like birds, small mammals, we may use them by air. But generally speaking, the majority of animals that you see, the hoofstock, the carnivores, animals like that, quite often many of those animals are transported over land. There are, like I say, exceptions. Some of the great apes, some of the big cats, they can go via air depending on how long the distance is and the need to get them there on time.
right. I was having a discussion with one of my friends the other day, and we were talking about uh, monkeys, and he pointed out a chimpanzee and said, "Oh, cheetah was a monkey," and I said, "No, there you go. Now we can see you better.
Sorry about
Cheetah was a chimpanzee." And people sometimes, and that's what I wanted to discuss with you. There's this great discussion going on about man came from the ape, but that that species that we came from, and where apes and gorillas and monkeys came from, that died out billions of years ago, and it doesn't exist anymore because we have. And the reason I bring that up is because somebody said on TV the other night, "Well, if we come from apes, then why are there still apes in zoos?" And I just wanted you to discuss that branch has died out, and that will never happen, where an ape suddenly is born and turns into a human.
No, that's not going to happen. Uh,
No.
all of us are continuously evolving, except the amount of time. Now, it didn't become extinct billions of years ago, millions of years ago, but
Well, you know what I mean.
yeah, I know what you mean. Uh, but the bottom line is, yes, there are different branches on the tree, and some branches continue to exist while other branches evolved in different ways. And humans are the ones that have evolved from primarily a type of ape and become what we are today.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, isn't it the chimpanzee, like cheetah, and the gorillas are closer to us than any of the other primates?
Yeah, actually, chimpanzees are more closely related to us than they are to gorillas, which is interesting. A lot of people don't realize that gorillas have been followed by orangutans and the apes. People
Mhm.
like they'll call chimpanzees, they'll call orangutans, they'll call gorillas monkeys. I see it at the zoo all the time, and I try to educate people by letting them know, no, they're not monkeys, they're apes. The bottom
Mm.
line, it doesn't have a tail. It can be a monkey. All monkeys have to have a tail. The largest of all the monkeys are the baboons.
Yes, yes, that was my mother-in-law.
Oh,
Thank you
geez.
very much. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to, by the way, I have a quote here, and I just want to read this from a dear friend of ours, Mr. Danny Lebitard, talking about you. Okay, we've talked about this before. He's a 5-hour energy drink for our show. Lebitard says, if 5-hour energy drinks had a terrible mustache.
I don't know what Dan's got against my mustache, but he's been trying to get me to shave it or exploit it every chance he gets. I don't know why.
You know, he had one in college.
Yeah, I know he had one. He had one when he was doing a column for the Herald. His first Herald picture's got the mustache and the goatee. So, I think he's just jealous because his wasn't as nice as mine.
Well, I have a brother. Now, this is kind of interesting. And I know you're a married man, and as well as my brother. He's a Greek Orthodox priest. And his wife loves him with a beard, but he doesn't because it itches.
Yeah.
So he'll grow it for a while and then he'll shave it off. And he came to me, he called me on the phone one day and he said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Well, take a picture of yourself with the beard. Then take a picture of yourself without the beard. Whichever you have at the moment, put the other one on the refrigerator and she can look at that picture in remembrance of what it was." And then, it's the only answer I really ever had. You do a lot of work with television shows. You have in the past. The Lion King production came to you, the Zoo Miami, and you helped in that production. You've won numerous awards, but you also, your first shot, I think, was on Miami Vice, was it not?
Well, I wasn't actually on
You
camera,
weren't on it. No, you weren't on
but
camera.
worked with Miami Vice was I was one of the animal handlers for the show. So anytime you saw an animal like Elvis the alligator, or a fish tank in a psychiatrist's office, or a snake in some, I was one of the people who would handle those animals. And I'll tell you what, it was a huge opportunity for me. It was a tremendous cash cow. I was incredibly spoiled working on that show, because I would make more money on that show in one day than I would make in a whole week working at the zoo. So it was a wonderful experience for me. I got to meet some great people. I got to meet, a lot of big stars, and I got to see the behind the scenes of what it takes to make such an incredible, iconic show. Because Miami Vice, I think, will be a standalone show forever. I think it was the beginning of what they call the music video.
Yeah.
And it really laid the path for a lot of programs following it. So I feel very privileged to have worked on that show, to have worked with the actors, and to have really learned what it takes to produce such a major show.
I want to thank Jackson Rip Holmes. He said, an excellent guest. Ron Magill is an excellent guest, and he's also a dear friend of mine. We've become that over the years. We're going to be working, as Ron knows, with my business partner and I. We're trying to work something out at the zoo with the foundation and everything else sometime this fall or into the next year, as far as doing a charitable event with the Elks and with Ron and the zoo. And we're still working on getting closer to that. So my love for the animals, as Ron knows, is second to none, as his is. And it's always a pleasure. And Ron's going to be back from time to time, because this is important for the people of Miami. And this show is all about Miami. And by the way, did you ever hear the story? I know the story. I know the culprits behind this. When Don Shula went into his shower one day after practice, and when he went into the shower, now they taped up the gator's mouth, but there was a gator in his shower. And according to Larry Zonka, when he looked at me and Manny Fernandez looked at me, he said, shoes didn't touch the ground for at least a mile. He just took off. And he always blamed the Kuchenberg and someone else. But the truth was, it was Manny Fernandez. I think it was Bob Kuchenberg and Manny Fernandez, because Manny used to wrestle alligators.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually why. I mean,
it was the thing back then, Gary. What can I tell you? Listen, those guys, especially those guys from the 72 team, understand I have two sports teams that are iconic in my life.
Yeah.
I grew up in New York, and as a 9-year-old boy growing up in New York, the 1969 Miracle Mets were everything to me. 1969 growing up in New York was fantastic, because remember, that's when the Mets won the World Series, that's when the Knicks won the NBA championship, and that's when the Jets and Joe Namath won the Super Bowl. So it was an incredible year. And then I moved to Miami in 1972, and there were the 72 Dolphins. I have a helmet signed by all the Dolphins, all the 72 Dolphins in my room. I have a ball and photographs with all the 69 Mets. As a matter of fact, I got one of the greatest highlights of my life as far as recreation goes. There used to be an old Joe DiMaggio Legends game that they did with old baseball stars to raise money for Joe DiMaggio's hospital. And I was invited to play as a celebrity guest on that game. And I played with about 8 of the original 1960 Mets. Think of how I felt. I remember I was playing second base, and I threw out Bert Campaneris running to first. I threw out the ball to Ed Kranepool playing first base, with Ron Swoboda playing right field behind me. This was like a dream come true. I mean, I just can't believe I could have died right after that game and been happy.
Well, I had something to do with your one passion where the Jets beat the Baltimore Colts.
Uh-oh.
I stood on the sidelines. My brother was a member of the Baltimore Colts.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was also in Super Bowl V, and he made the interception that won the game for the Baltimore Colts over the Dallas Cowboys. And do you know, if you look back at that film of that game, the Colts were in what we now call the red zone 5 times during that game and couldn't get it in the end zone but once.
It was
and it was heartbreaking. But my brother Michael, to the day he died, said the Super Bowl V ring meant nothing because they didn't beat the Jets. But
Orange Bowl too, right?
I was in the Orange Bowl, and afterwards we all went somewhere for a small party, but it wasn't a very happy party. And at Carol Rosenblum's home, you remember he had a home on Golden Beach, and we went there for that. But yeah, I was part of that. But I was also rooting for the Baltimore Orioles, although I'm not from Baltimore, I'm from Pennsylvania. But I was rooting for the Orioles against the Mets, even though I'm a Philly fan down deep inside.
Well, the bottom line is both of those teams, the Orioles and the Colts, were supposed to crush the Mets and the Dolphins. So is that? I love dog wins.
If when many years later, when because I knew Namath, I knew some of the guys on the team, and I remember saying to Joe, if you had to play those guys again another week later, best out of 3 or whatever, he said, oh, the Colts would have adjusted. They didn't do any adjustments during that game, but he said they would have adjusted, and he said they would have beat us. He said, he said the little things that happened that caused them not to score touchdowns wouldn't have been prevalent. He said it just was our day and not theirs, and that's all there was to it. And that's the way life is, and people need to understand that. Talk about some of the charities and stuff that people can contribute to for the zoo, because I want people to be able to understand. I have you on here because I want people to get excited about the zoo. I want people to go to the zoo. I want people to contribute and help the zoo grow so you can have your programs and save more animals.
I appreciate that, Gary. The Zoo Miami Foundation is a 4 or 5-star charity navigator organization. They do incredible work in raising funds for us at the zoo. You can donate to the Zoo Miami Foundation, and through the Zoo Miami Foundation, you can specify the donation if you want to go to the Ron McGill Conservation Endowment. And that endowment, that money that goes into that endowment, only gets spent on conservation in the wild. Not a penny of that money gets spent at the zoo. It only gets spent on making sure to help animals, save animals in the wild by supporting things like scholarships for conservation careers, doing things like, getting radio collars and camera traps and the equipment, buying vehicles for research. You can do that way also. Just go to zoomiami.org. You can tap in the Ron McGill Conservation Endowment. It's all totally tax deductible. And again, what you're doing is you're investing in protecting wildlife for future generations.
Yeah. And I know I told you once I managed to move home, I'm going to volunteer to come to the zoo, and you've already picked out a job for me. I know it's going to be something to do with the elephants, you said, and I have a feeling I know what that is, but nevertheless, I can't wait to get home if they'll ever bring the rents down. My producer, Andres, is a major fan of yours, and his father is a major fan of yours. Andres, I know you had a question for Ron. Would you like to ask it at this time?
I don't
Can't hear you.
Unmute.
Wait, go ahead. He forgot to turn his own microphone on. I'm telling you right now. But I'll tell you what, I cried on the sidelines of Super Bowl III when we lost. I cried like a baby because I lost $700 that day.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Go ahead, Andres.
All right. It's a pleasure to see you, Mr. McGill. I had to ask because I know that you have a storied career in animal photography. Has this ever happened to you? And I'm going to pull up the photo now. You're in the middle of taking a picture, and the animal that you are taking pictures of will approach you directly.
I have had that happen to me, not like it is in that photograph. My suspicion is that is a Photoshop photograph, but I have had animals come very, very close. I had an elephant come at me in the Ngorongoro crater and actually almost flipped the truck over, and I thought he was going to kill us, but fortunately we got unscathed from that one. But I have had animals be curious. I've had a leopard looking at using a big telephoto lens, sees its reflection in the glass in the front of the big telephoto lens, and literally walk almost right up to the telephoto. So there's been some incidences like that, but nothing like depicted in that photograph.
Yeah, especially if you got your back turned towards a lion,
Hey.
that's definitely a big no-no. My grandfather is a big animal lover. He's loved going on safaris, and he's been all over the world to take pictures, and everywhere he goes, he brings a camera with him. Of all the different animals and stuff that he sees. And so I've kind of inherited that love for nature from him. And so I've always been a big admirer of you. And I had to ask because I always see pictures like that on the internet. And it's like, what's going through your mind when these types of things happen?
Yeah. Well, Andres, let me give you a little hint. Don't believe everything you see on the internet.
Fair enough.
Any other questions, Andres?
No, I think that'll be it. Thank you so much
you.
for talking to me, Mr. McGill. And
Mr. McGill's my
show.
You can call him the zoo guy. That's what he has on his license plate.
That's not Mr. Magill.
No, you call him Ron. That's who that gentleman is.
All
That's
right,
who that
Ron.
gentleman is.
Well,
Thanks, Andres.
it's a pleasure
Son,
talking
thank
to
you, Andres. Thank you. Ron, you're a married man, and she's a beautiful woman in every way, shape, or form. And that's one of the. I can't wait to meet her and your family. How have they been with you, with your time at the zoo? I know you. I know you spend time with your family. You have to make time for your family. But how is it with growing up? I don't know if you have boys or girls as children, but how is it raising children around that sort of environment? Is it a wonderful experience watching them grow and loving animals? And did your wife take to animals other than a puppy dog or a kitty cat like you do?
Listen, my wife is a goddess. Everything that's good about me is because of my wife. She,
You've learned the number one lesson. They are goddesses.
I'm being honest. I don't know. I mean, I definitely married up. She is, I met her. I don't know if people know. I met her when I got bitten by a crocodile, and she was my therapist in the hospital after surgery. That's how I met her. So
Really?
when bad things happen to me from animals, there's a good reason behind it. We have two kids. I have a son who's going to be 30 years old next month, in a couple months actually, and a daughter who's 25. My daughter lives in Spain. She works out there, and my son works actually for Captain Rick Murphy on Sportsman's Adventures, the Discovery show on fishing. So he's an editor and a videographer for that show. So he loves the outdoors. He's really an animal guy. My daughter loves the outdoors. She's not like he is, wants to be out with animals all the time, but she has a wonderful fascination and curiosity about them. My wife, in the beginning, now, when I met my wife, she had only had a pet hamster. That's the only animal she'd ever been in contact. So I got her first puppy, and she has learned to love animals. It was great. Listen, raising the kids, there were times I'd have to bring animals home when I was bottle feeding an animal over through the night or whatever. They've been, I've got a picture of a bear cub in the crib with my daughter when she was 1, that I had to, bottle feed and such. And the kids learned the most important lesson I try to teach my kids is, listen, you don't have to be afraid of animals. You should always respect animals, but don't be afraid of them. Fear sometimes leads to bad things. If you properly respect an animal, you should never be in a position to be afraid of it. I've been able to take my kids, around the world, whether it be the rainforests of Panama or, the plains of Africa. They've gone with me on some of these adventures, and they've learned a lot. They've learned a lot, not just about animals, but about people, about culture. I tell people all the time, and I mean this with no disrespect to teachers or formal schooling, but there is no greater education than travel. And my kids and my wife, myself, have truly benefited from that.
Yeah, I was very lucky. My dad was a captain for Eastern, and my 2 uncles were pilots for other airlines. And my passion, of course, is art and music and stuff. So I would go to Rome and see the Sistine Chapel under reconstruction, cleaning it up and stuff like that. Not reconstruction, but cleaning it. But I also have a passion for animals. And the only type of animals I don't really care for are reptiles. I don't know why, but is there a natural abhorrence by most people to snakes and stuff?
I just think that, people are naturally uncomfortable around things that, for instance, snakes that don't have arms and legs. But a lot of that, Gary, trust me, is learned behavior. As a small child, you probably saw other people react that way to snakes and lizards and things like that. And that's something you pick up on your own, because there have been studies that have been done where they take babies, 1-year-old, and they put a snake in front of them, and the baby goes and reaches to touch the snake or goes and reaches to touch the lizard. There's a curiosity there. But as you get older and you watch, the way they're portrayed in the media, or you watch a family member or an adult go, oh my God, that's a learned behavior, and that kind of rubs off on you. And that's, I think, what has happened to an awful lot of people, unfortunately, because reptiles are really incredible animals. Having said that, if I wanted to talk about one thing that I cannot stand, it's roaches. I don't like roaches.
Oh, I don't either. And it's a funny thing, the world's going to blow up someday, and guess what's going to be left? The cockroach,
There you go.
Didn't you had an experience with Jim Fowler, I believe. You traveled with him, and I believe you were in the Panama area, were you not, when this occurred? And you were introduced to an indigenous tribe. And what was Jim Fowler like? Was he as nice and as accommodating as he appeared on television?
Other than my father, Jim Fowler was my hero. He was my idol growing up. I watched him as a 6-year-old boy on a black and white television set, and my dream was to do what Jim Fowler did. Never dreamed I would actually meet him. It was about 35 years ago. I met him when he was doing a national tour around the country on behalf of Wild Kingdom. And he would call the local zoos in every city he traveled to and ask for them to come with some animals, so he didn't have to fly around the country with animals and, put unnecessary stress on those animals and travel. And when I found out Jim Fowler was coming, it was at the Miami Beach Convention Center. I'll never forget it. I said, please send me. And that's when I met Jim for the first time. And to make a long story short, we became lifelong friends. He became my mentor. He is the person who taught me how to present animals, how to always respect animals. And for me, he is the foundation of my career. He passed away a couple of years ago, well into his 80s. And to this day, like I said, other than my father, he will always be my hero.
Yeah, I always used to watch the Wild Kingdom like you did on Sunday nights. And my father would always laugh if he was around. He'd say, it's amazing that Fowler guy is always down with the pythons and the animals getting in the mud and the rain. And Marlon is in the studio just as calm as possibly can be. He said, when does Marlon get out into the field and actually do something? I said, Dad, Marlon Perkins is an older gentleman, But I always remember. Go ahead.
Jim would tell me that. Jim would tell me, listen, Marlon did do a lot of stuff. He said, listen, I think people didn't give Marlon a lot of credit, is what Jim would tell me. But yeah, towards the end of the run of the show, the fact of the matter is that Jim was, in fact, considerably younger and more fit than Marlon was. So yeah, he did a lot of the heavy work when it came to working around animals.
We have Ron Magill on us with the ambassador from the Zoo Miami right here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you as I am every Tuesday right here on the Community News Network. I hope you're joining us. I hope you're enjoying the show. Ron Magill is a dear friend of mine, and I'm so looking forward to actually seeing him again in person. It's a weird thing that I'm about to say, but I have met some human beings that I would be glad to trade in for an animal any day of the week. And I've heard so many people say, I'd rather be around my dog or my cat or something like that than be around human beings. Do you find that true too?
There's certain people that I like less than others, but
we lost your picture, by the way.
Oh, did you? What happened? Hold on a second here.
We lost your picture.
All right, where am I going? I don't know where I'm at here.
Well, we hear your voice, and that's
how's
cool.
that?
There you go. Okay. You're back.
Okay.
You're back. Yeah, I mean, do you find that true in your own world? I mean, you're surrounded by animals constantly, but you run across people and you say, who is really the animal here?
Well, I'll leave it at this. Animals are always honest with you. Know where they're coming from. There's an old saying that says the only thing predictable about a wild animal is that they're unpredictable, but unpredictable in that you don't know how they're going to react to things, but they won't lie to you. They won't try to deceive you. And I think that's a trait that we need more of in human beings.
Talk about the zoo, the daily costs and the expenses. And you also have a volunteer program that I would certainly love to have people get in touch with the people at the zoo and volunteer to help out, whether it be in concession stands or with the animals themselves. Talk about that and how important that is.
We have an operating budget of about $27 million. It costs us well over $1 million every year just to feed the animals. This doesn't count the veterinary care, the staffing, and all of that. So it is a big expense. We are funded partially by Miami-Dade County in the sense that it is a Parks and Recreation program here. So we're part of the park system of Miami-Dade County. So your tax money is doing some good and helping the zoo out in that. We also get funded by the Zoo Miami Foundation. They do a lot and raise money through capital campaigns, through memberships. When you become a member of the zoo, you're helping support the zoo in that way. So there's a lot of revenue sources that are taken in the zoo, but the zoo does not ever pay for itself strictly by admissions. That has to be supplemented by an extra revenue streams, which are done, again, through taxes and through grants and private fundraising. Our volunteer program is fantastic. We have volunteers for adults, the docent program, and we have, I think, the best volunteer program at the zoo is called CTS, Conservation Teen Scientists, and I think these are for kids ages 15 to 18, I'm pretty sure, 15 to 17, 14 to 17, somewhere in that range. But man, that's the greatest group of kids I've ever worked with. I've been at the zoo since it opened, and I can tell you that Conservation Teen Scientists, for me, if you have a teenager who's interested in wildlife and conservation and environmental science, have them sign up for that Conservation Teen Scientist program because it is outstanding.
Where is some of the best? I want to thank Philippe. He chimed in with congrats to Gary Allen. Philippe is down in South America, so that's always good. He's a wonderful cartoon artist. He's done some caricatures of me that'll just it just freaks me out. If somebody wants to be where you are, or somebody wants to be a vet, or somebody wants to work at a zoo, what sort of educational background and skill sets do these people need to have?
Well, I always urge people to get a degree, a college degree in the sciences. That's going to give you a good foundation. Having said that, right now at Zoo Miami, a college degree is not required, simply a high school diploma, but it does require a certain amount of experience. You have to have a minimum of 1 year experience working, paid working experience working with animals, exotic animals, not cats and dogs. So experience there. What I tell people also is that it always helps to get volunteer experience. If you can go to a lot of these wildlife rehab places, whether it be places like, Pelican Harbor Seabird Station or Wildlife Rescue of Dade County, if you can get volunteer experience there, that is going to help you a lot when it comes to, having the upper hand and applying for a job at the zoo. But the bottom line is it's all about your passion, about what you've been able to do in the past and demonstrate that through, if I see someone who's volunteered, for 2 years helping to rescue and rehabilitate wild animals, that's going to tell me a lot about this person's commitment and dedication.
Yeah. The one thing that angers me the most are these puppy mills and these cat places. I like to watch Dr. Jeff, the guy from Colorado, who the vet, and Dr. Poole, he's cool. And they talk about the puppy mills and everything, but there doesn't seem to be anybody excited about shutting them down.
There are people that are working on it, Gary. I will tell you, I've heard of a lot of groups that are working on it and trying to make a difference there. And, the bottom line is this: it's all supply and demand. If people were able to double check where they're sourcing their puppies from, and they realize these puppy mills, they're not going to buy puppies from that type of origin, then those puppy mills slowly but surely will start to shut down. Listen, for me, if you're going to get a dog, go now to the shelters, because there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dogs and cats looking for a good home that will make wonderful companions. You don't need to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a, decorator dog.
No, and that drives me crazy, because my little girl that I have here, Princess, my cat, I adopted in Orlando. She was a stray. Furball, the little boy before her, I adopted him in Las Vegas when I was performing, because I'd see him around all over the place. He was a black cat, and it was getting close to Halloween, and I didn't realize this still goes on around Halloween. Places that'll adopt cats out will not adopt a black cat out anymore at all until Halloween is over with. And I thought that was kind of crazy, but it's like
no, because people many times adopt animals for the wrong reason, as a novelty or as a gift. It's like, they don't sell chicks anymore at Easter either. These are things that, people are getting these animals for the wrong reasons. They want them as a novelty item. They don't want them as a companion.
Yeah. You were saying how if you can get the experience in at the Zoo Miami, you don't need a college education, but if you need experience dealing with animals, and I was going to jokingly say with his 9 years of marriage count, because I had to deal with her and her mother. We've got a little bit of time left. What's coming up for Zoo Miami? What projects are coming along down the road that you're excited about?
Well, we just opened the Sea Turtle Hospital, but we're also working now on a new tiger addition to the tiger exhibit, which is going to provide what they call a nose-to-nose experience, where you'll be able to go in and actually be separated only by a pane of glass between you and the tigers. It's going to be a beautiful extension of that. That's a new capital program they're working on. And of course, the Zoo Animal Hospital. This is a $20 million plus capital investment that hopefully will break ground next year. And it is going to be one of, if not the best animal hospital in any zoo in the country. So it's a huge effort that is moving forward.
Is there any animal in particular that you don't have at the zoo that you would like to have for conservation purposes? I mean, I don't know. Do you have the American bison down there?
No, we don't have the American bison down here. The Bronx Zoo is really the flag bearer for the bison. They're the ones who have done so much.
Is that because of the weather? It's too hot in Miami for them.
It is. It does get a little warm for them. Yes, it does. But there's no real need for Zoo Miami to have those because other zoos that are more and properly located have them. Zoos now, it's not about having one of everything. It's about having animals that your climate, your facility would be best suited for that particular animal. You're not going to see penguins and polar bears here at Zoo Miami. Okay?
No.
What you're going to see are animals that are found in this type of climate, in a tropical or semi-tropical climate, that tend to thrive. Whether it's the heat and humidity that makes us uncomfortable, for most animals that we house there, it's luxury.
Really? I didn't realize that, but I kind of figured as much. You're not going to have a polar bear in Miami. I mean,
Right.
it'd be kind of out of sync. And the American bison is something that I love. I love that animal as
That's the
much as I
national.
do. Yeah, and you know what? And it's always forgotten about. But to Native Americans, that was a source of food and everything else. But I'm going to tell you something. Nothing tickles me more, and I'm always grateful that nobody really gets hurt. A few times it's happened, but when the visitors go to Yellowstone and they're taking pictures, and usually they're a certain cultural visitor, and they don't really read the signs too well, and they get a little too close to a mama bison, and and, and that bison will take off, and man, they're off like a shot, and they don't realize how fast that animal can move.
Listen, I see that not only in Yellowstone, I see it right here in Everglades National Park. I see tourists come down, turn their back to an alligator sitting on the shore, and to take a selfie. Listen,
Oh,
take to make people understand that these are wild animals. This is not some animatronic at Disney. Unfortunately, it's too much of this. A lot of this stuff is just driven by social media, Gary. People who want to get this picture that's going to get the most likes, the most hits, that type of stuff. And the reality is, people just need to stop it. I'm so
yeah.
tired of people being stupid for social media, doing dumb things. And again, I'm probably aging myself here, but I look at some of these TikTok videos, these people just doing something stupid,
Yeah.
and people looking at it. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's no contribution to the betterment of society what these people are doing. And the other people.
No, it's an ego thing. It's an ego thing, Ron. It always has been an ego thing. Listen, I don't have a pretty face, so selfies of me are useless. I can, like somebody said, I drive an old 04 accent car, and I said, yeah. I said, listen, I could drive a Ferrari. Women aren't going to be flocking to me, and they're not coming running at me for anything. Even when I was working in radio and TV down there, I'm telling you. But listen, we've got a few minutes left in the program. Is there one thing that you would like to tell people that are watching this program and people that will view it later on the internet, a message you'd like to get across to people about what Zoo Miami does and what they can do to help make Zoo Miami even better?
Well, listen, what Zoo Miami does is it provides these windows into the wild that can plant seeds, and especially kids, to get them to care. There's that old saying that says, in the end, we protect what we love what we understand, and we understand what we're taught. And what we try to do at the zoo is to teach people to understand and in turn love wildlife, love nature, and want. The best thing you can do for the zoo is come visit. You're visiting the zoo, help support what we do there. You can take it to the next level by becoming a member, becoming a premier member. Or if you've got even more money to spend in a way, you can take and make a donation to the Conservation Endowment, which guarantees money going to protect animals in the wild where they belong.
Right. What's the website and the phone number they can contact the zoo about all the attractions that are going on down there?
The website is zoomiami.org, and the phone number is 305-251-0400.
Ron Magill, you are a gem. You know that. I love you with all my heart. And it's always good to have you on, and we're going to have you back on again. And I can't wait for you and I to sit down in Miami and break bread. I can't wait to find out what volunteer job you've got lined up for me, but I'm sure it has something to do with a shovel. I just have this funny feeling that shovel. I'll tell you what I would love to do. I don't know if you have them, but I'd love to do a tour guide thing down there. Once I learn everything I need to do, I'd love to be able to volunteer and do some tour guiding of people and showing them
interpretations, and we do have tour guides for special VIP tours, so you can look into that.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay at it, nevertheless. But stay right there where you are, Ron. I just want to thank all of you out there for taking the time to join us here on Mainstream, all of you that was online and all of you who made comments. And next week, we have an absolutely wonderful show for you. at 2 p.m. right here on the Community News Network. You'll hear more about that. I have Chef Alex Silverfox coming on about his new book with Cato Kitchen, and he's also a world-renowned photographer. We've got some wonderful shows coming up for you. I think, I'm not 100% certain, but I think we're going to have Craig Stevens and Belkis Duray on at some point in the next month. So until next time, would you please do me a favor until next week? Take care of yourselves and each other.
We good? I got to get to a meeting.
All right, you go ahead and go enjoy your meeting, and I'll wait here for Andres to get back.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Gary. Take care.
Bye-bye. Andres, you going to run the end of the show? Andres.